Well, good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us. My name is Woody Hastings. Welcome to our webinar for today, Community Choice Energy in the Central Valley, Opportunities and Challenges. You see two logos down there at the bottom of the screen. This webinar is a service of the Clean Power Exchange, which is a program of the Center for Climate Protection. Oops.
Yeah.
And we always like to thank our sponsor, the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, for providing for sponsoring these webinars. Your webinar team today, that's me on the left, Woody Hastings, Energy Program Manager for the Center for Climate Protection, and Nina Turner, our Energy Program Associate, and she'll be helping with the questions and answers at the end of the webinar. We do have a Central Valley team on the left. The three folks on the left, Destiny, Letitia, and Mike Dozier, based in the Fresno area. And on the right, Valeria and Lee Neves in the Stockton area, Stockton and San Joaquin County. So if you'd like to be placed in touch with them, please get in touch with me and I can put you in touch with the right person. My contact information will be at the end of the webinar. Our presenters for today are Placer County Supervisor Kirk Uhler and Pioneer Community Energy Governing Board Member Rick DeGolia, Atherton City Council and Vice Chair of Peninsula Clean Energy, and Darrel Pyle, Hanford City Manager. Just a few housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded. Everyone will receive a copy of the recording. We're all in everyone in the audience is in listen-only mode. What you can do is enter questions in your control panel at any time, and we will do our best to get to your questions at the end of the webinar. That'll be in the last 10 or 15 minutes. If you're having any trouble, we'll do our best to try to resolve it on the spot, but hopefully we'll have a good recording and we can share that with you. There are several handouts also should be available in your control panel, presenter bios, and two Central Valley reports that the Center for Climate Protection has produced, a survey of voters on energy issues produced in 2016 and an economic analysis published in 2017. The slide decks and the recording will be posted on the Clean Power Exchange, which is cleanpowerexchange.org, in the resources section under webinars. So just an overview of today's webinar. I am going to start out with sort of a history of community choice activity in the Central Valley, the Center for Climate Protection's work in the Central Valley, and a little bit about why focus on the Central Valley. And then Kirk, Supervisor Uhler will share the experience of Placer County in informing Pioneer Community Energy. And then we will go to Rick DeGolia, Atherton City Council member, to talk about the experience of launching Peninsula Clean Energy, San Mateo County's community choice agency. And we'll close out with Darrel Pyle, City Manager of Hanford. They are the furthest along in the Central Valley on developing a community choice agency. So Darrel will give us an update on the activities there in Hanford. So a little bit about our work in the Central Valley. First and foremost, I want to let everyone know, and I'll remind you at the end of the webinar, we are hosting a community meeting in Fresno on November 13th. That'll be at the Nielsen Conference Center in Fresno. Again, I will remind folks at the end. CleanPowerExchange.org features a unique interactive map that has community choice information, status of community choice development on all 482 cities in the state of California and all 58 counties. So if you've never visited that map, that's a good place to go to find out what's going on with community choice around the state of California. We publish e-news every couple weeks, and that's divvied up by geography, so you can sign up for the San Joaquin Valley e-news to stay abreast of what's going on in the valley. And then a variety of other resources and tools and information related to community choice. We publish white papers occasionally, and I just want to, the two I already mentioned are examples, and then The webinars, I just want to point out one particular webinar in June 2017. We hosted a webinar on the economics of community choice in the Central Valley. So that's something folks might want to check out. Again, that's in the resources section, webinars in Clean Power Exchange. We also host an annual symposium, the Business of Local Energy Symposium, that's really brings together 400 or so folks from around the state of California, all focused on really how do we, advance the local clean energy economy and localize our energy resources that brings the job creation and other economic benefits. And so look for that coming up in the spring of 2019. The last one was in June in Sacramento earlier this year. So again, the white papers, we did a survey, and just a little bit about what that survey found in 2016 was that basically a super majority of people in the Central Valley, as was the case here in Sonoma County where we're based, we did this when we were in the process of pursuing the Sonoma Clean Power, Sonoma County Community Choice Agency, which is just to survey voters about their thoughts about electricity, energy. Supermajorities want a choice, they want clean power, they want reinvestment in their local economy. So this is really something we found pretty much everywhere, and we were very pleased to find the same results in the Central Valley, and that folks are interested in seeing, supermajorities interested in seeing greenhouse gas reductions. The other study to point out, which is if a jurisdiction in the Central Valley, for example, Fresno, were to launch a community choice agency, and if they are to develop, in this case, in this example, 10% of their electricity from local solar over the 6-year study period, quite a number of jobs created, over 3,000 jobs, and generating $380 million in economic activity. And again, that was presented by Ben Foster, the study author, in a June 2017 webinar. So that's available at cleanpowerexchange.org. Something else I want to bring folks' attention to, in the resources section, there is a page specifically dedicated to the Central Valley. So look for that, Clean Power Exchange, Resources, Central Valley. And in that section, we have Friends of Community Choice for the Central Valley, which simply calls for an evaluation of the pros and cons of community choice. And so we have a little over 50 individuals and organizations signed up on the Friends of Community Choice, and we invite anyone and everyone on the webinar to also add your name to that list of support for an evaluation of community choice in the Valley. I think it's important to note that there is a history of community choice in the Valley. There was an effort in the mid-2000s. A number of over a dozen cities and counties got together and formed the San Joaquin Valley Power Authority. And that was actually the first community choice agency to file and get certified an implementation plan with the California Public Utilities Commission. The timing was not very good. It was in the period right prior to the economic downturn in 2008, and there were several other factors that led to that effort ultimately not launching service. Over 10 years have passed since then, so we sort of see that this is that was a very pioneering effort, and learned a lot of lessons, and it's time, we feel, for the Valley to take another look at community choice. Currently, the status up and down the state, you see most of the community choice agencies are along the coast. Placer County, Pioneer Community Energy is not that case. In San Bernardino County, we've got some local governments, some cities that have launched, so that's that area. And most of the Central Valley, there's really not much activity. Going from north to south, yellow here really indicates earliest stages of evaluation. There has been some indication and some interest in San Joaquin County and the city of Stockton in pursuing community choice, so they're marked at the earliest stages. partly due to the early efforts in the Fresno County area on the San Joaquin Valley Power Authority, as well as some more recent indications of interest in looking at community choice, also noted as yellow, early stages of evaluation. And then again, of course, in Kings County down here, because of the efforts of Hanford, we are, that's also noted. Actually, that could be maybe notched up from earliest stages, as they do have a technical study completed at this point. But a lot of the counties in the Central Valley are still gray, which is that they're eligible for community choice, but they have not sort of taken up any kind of formal evaluation. So we'd like to see more activity and see those colors shifting from yellow to orange to ultimately green, launching service. All right, so at this point, we will shift to our first presenter, which is Supervisor Uhler, and I will bring up your slides, Kirk, and I will also transfer control to you. So let me get to that. And I will give you. All right, you should now have control of the mouse to move through the slides. So folks, I'd like to introduce Supervisor Kirk Uhler from Placer County for his presentation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being a part of this conversation today. And what I want to talk about just briefly as we move through this morning is really what's the experience as an elected official being involved in putting something like this together. And if I had it to do over again, what would I change? So with that, go ahead. I don't probably need to explain to this group what community choice aggregation is really all about, and how things change from a user experience. I think probably most folks on here understand that at least in our model, we still have PG&E providing all of our delivery, and very little from a user experience actually changes if they have a problem with their electricity delivery. It's still a PG&E contact. Billing looks very similar, all of that. So I won't go through too much of that. We'll move on. Who are we? We decided to go ahead and partner with all of our incorporated cities, get them on board with the exception of Roseville. Roseville is a full service city that offers electrical service through Roseville Electric. They're their own utility. So the rest of the incorporated cities within Placer County and the county came together in order to form Pioneer Community Energy. The number of reasons that we cited, mostly it's local control over rates and rate stabilization, keeping dollars locally, and really being in a position where if we are successful, when we are successful in keeping our rates lower than they would otherwise be through PG&E, and that's where we are right now. We're at about on average about 9% lower across the board than PG&E rates within our county. We intend to use some of the revenue that we generate to essentially subsidize an economic development rate, where we can offer larger users if they meet certain criteria that we as a local board determine are important to us, job generation, good corporate citizen kind of stuff. We can offer incentive rates to help businesses make the decision to locate within the Pioneer Community Energy territory. One of the biggest challenges we've had in Placer County when it comes to economic development is the fact that we do have Roseville, we have SMUD just adjacent to us, both of which are offering electrical rates to larger consumers that are far more competitive than anything PG&E has, and so it has made a lot of our economic development very challenging. So this allows us local control over the rates, as well as local control over where we're purchasing our energy from. So I thought I hit the little, there we go. So from an economic development standpoint, what do we anticipate? Well, it means that the ratepayer savings, number one, will be staying in our community. As I mentioned, we are right now at about an average of 9% less than what folks would have been paying if they had just remained with PG&E and not made the transfer over. We will have fewer adjustments in our rates than PG&E does. It seems like every time you turn around, PG&E's got another rate case in front of the CPUC. And then, of course, today, if you are somehow or in some way dissatisfied with your service and you are a PG&E customer and you really don't have much of a voice, you can contact PG&E and voice your concerns, or you can make a trip down to San Francisco and sit through a meeting of the Public Utilities Commission. But beyond that, what say do you have? Well, now with Pioneer Community Power, your local elected officials are essentially your utility board. And so there is much greater direct access and local control for people to give them the opportunity to express their opinions about how services are being delivered. So where are we now? We have facilities. We'd been operating in startup mode in the county, within the county treasurer tax collector's office. Janine Windeshausen, who's our treasurer tax collector, has been acting as our executive director. We have begun recruiting for our key positions, including our executive director, some of our power purchase people, as well as our legislative and regulatory people. Recruitments are underway. Our budget's about $60 million. We anticipate revenues, obviously, in excess of expenditures. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten into the business to begin with. And so you just see a rough breakdown right there of where that budget is divided between different expense lines. Where do we sit today in terms of what it cost us to get going and where we are right now? So the county fronted the costs associated with putting the Joint Powers Authority together. So we fronted the cost for all of the feasibility, the implementation, the startup, and that was, as it shows, about $1.5 million. The county then also, once the JPA was actually established, through the county's treasury, having our treasurer tax collector serve as our executive director, through the county's treasury, we set up a line of credit for Pioneer Community Energy of $40 million, because not only do you have staff costs, but your primary cost, of course, is the cost of entering into electricity contracts. And so we established a line of credit of $40 million in order to begin the process. We used about 17 million of that 40 million and have begun paying that back. The county has already been paid back our startup share, and the line of credit is now paid down to under $15 million of the 40 that was available. And meanwhile, while we've done that, we've been building up our reserves. We have a power purchase reserve, we have an operating reserve, and we do have a small capital reserve as well. We believe that we had said 3 years. At this point, it's looking like closer to 2-year mark. We will have paid off our line of credit, and we will have our reserves fully funded. So what was one of the biggest hurdles that we had? One of the biggest hurdles that we had was on net energy metering. Our solar customers. Solar customers, a lot of confusion around the establishment of a solar rate. And so anybody thinking about getting into this business, I encourage you generate tremendous clarity around how folks will be rolled in if they are net energy metering customers, if they're solar customers. There was confusion, not just amongst the consuming public, but also amongst our board. Staff had a difficult time communicating to our board what exactly the transition period for solar customers was going to look like. So I encourage you, this was where we spent more time and had more public comment than any other item that we experienced, was just on the solar customers. And of course, the fact that 3 of our board members are solar customers didn't necessarily help the conversation. Well, it did. I shouldn't say it didn't help the conversation, but let's just say they had their own very strong opinions on how things should move forward. So really, if you're going to move forward with this, learn from our mistake, take the time to really lay out what your strategy is going to be for transitioning net energy metering customers over. The other thing, I don't think we have, yeah, I'm right to the end. So the other thing that I will tell you is, if you're thinking about starting your own CCA, there is no such thing as too much communication of what you're trying to do. We spent the better part of 1.5 years in developing this, myself working with Janine Windeshausen, our treasurer, from the very beginning, doing community outreach, getting out to service clubs, going to the cities, going to our local municipal advisory councils. We did outreach upon outreach. We sent out press releases about how we were developing, we were taking advantage of community choice aggregation, how we were going to bring the cities together. We did all of this stuff, and still, once we finally pulled the trigger and Pioneer Community Energy was formed, the vast majority of people said, wait, what the heck is this? You know, the first letter that they got from us saying, you are going to be transitioned, because you have 4 different letters that you send out over a period of time before the transition occurs. That very first letter, people just had no idea that this was going on. And so you cannot over communicate what it is that you are thinking about doing. Bring in, go meet with your editorial boards. If you have anybody in local media who specializes in covering local government related stuff, make sure they understand what you're doing. So if we had it to do over again, I think the 2 things that we would do differently is, number 1, we'd spend more on public education and outreach prior to the first letters going out. And number 2, we would have much greater certainty and clarity around net energy metering customers before we got into actually switching customers over. So I will pause there and look forward to the opportunity to answer any questions when that time comes.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much, Kirk, for that excellent presentation. And I will now bring up Rick's presentation. And Rick, would you like to have the keyboard and mouse, or would you like me to retain that control?
I'm fine for you to do it.
Okay.
So I'm Rick DeGolia. I am Vice Chair of Peninsula Clean Energy. And I just want to be clear that the opinions and emphasis that I've got in this presentation are mine. It's not policy of Peninsula Clean Energy. The first slide is titled Goals and Reasons for Formation. These are really our goals. So we, over the 2 years that we've been in operation, and nearly 3 years we've existed as a JPA, we've had, we have a substantial board. There are 22 members of the board, which are composed of 1 representative from each of the 20 city councils in the county and 2 representatives from the Board of Supervisors. And these goals were developed at 2 full-day offsites that our board had, and they speak clearly to the goals, which are essentially that we can deliver electricity at a lower cost, and we're doing so just as Pioneer is, and we have the ability to define what the content of the electricity is that we deliver. And our electricity, we have the goals of making it 100% renewable 20 years before the state required compliance with 100% renewable power. We today deliver 85% greenhouse gas free electricity, and our goal is to increase that 5% every year. So by 2021, we'll have 100% greenhouse gas free electricity. And that is composed of small hydro, which is renewable, wind, solar, both of which are renewable, and large hydro that is imported from the Pacific Northwest, which is not defined as renewable in California, but it's definitely greenhouse gas free. That's the content of our energy. The two reasons for formation that aren't listed here, but were very important for us, was one, the local control by local elected officials of the whole delivery and definition around electricity was extremely important to us. And I'll get into that a little more in the presentation, but the ability to define where you're going to get your electricity and what your programs are that you can use with the funds that you retain was extremely important to us. You know, PG&E is an investor-owned utility, and 10.5% of their rate base is distributed to their shareholders as an authorized return. Our shareholders are the consumers in our county, and we're very focused, and like Kirk said, we spent a lot of time reaching out to stakeholders and consumers in the county before we actually launched the JPA, and I'll get to that in the next slide. The other thing I want to mention is our association with the Central Valley, and that's the reason that I'm here on this webinar. Last week, we broke ground on a 200 megawatt solar facility just outside Los Banos in Merced County. And we're very serious about wanting to work with members of the Central Valley to look at the benefits of consumer choice electricity and why you might want to do that. We see that both as the right kind of thing that we can do to help give back to newly forming CCAs. Marin County was tremendously helpful to us, and we used, you know, they led us along the path of what we needed to do, and we want to help others do the same. We're in that project. We're generating 400 jobs that'll be in the Central Valley during construction, and we will be launching a second solar facility in Kings County that is a 100 megawatt facility. So the Central Valley is so solar rich, it's a great place for us to focus. We want to generate electricity as close to our consumer base as we can, and we want to give back to those where we're able to, you know, establish that economic activity. So if we can go to the next slide, that'd be great. So I'm going to run quickly through just our experience with formation, which is on this slide and the next slide. And we started by forming a leadership group within the county that was largely composed of a few members of the Board of Supervisors and a few members of city councils in the county. And we very quickly did a broad outreach to create an advisory group of different stakeholders in the county. I think it's, and you can see we took a year to do the outreach. Once we had established the advisory group, we did many meetings throughout the county, at least one meeting before every city council, many city councils. We did 2 meetings before them. We presented to church groups and community groups and union groups and business groups. It was a very broad effort to be inclusive. And I think it's because of the time that we took and the outreach that we did that we were able to get 100% of the city council members in the county from every political persuasion to support this. In fact, it's the only issue in the 162-year history of San Mateo County that every city council member and member of the Board of Supervisors voted for. Essentially a year after we started that outreach effort, we formed the JPA. And a year after that, we did the feasibility study. Sorry, I'm a little off here. 3 months after that, we did a feasibility study that the county fronted the money for. And we used the county's sustainability office for both outreach and analysis, and they were incredibly helpful in helping us launch. Then once that feasibility study was done, we were able to use the conclusions of it to show people what the economic benefits would be of forming a CCA in San Mateo County. And it took us a year of doing that outreach before we formed the JPA. So if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Okay, once the JPA is formed, then the first really technical thing that you need to do is put together an implementation plan and file that with the CPUC. The CPUC has limited jurisdiction over CCAs. It's a little bit more than they have over municipal utilities, and it's nothing like the level of regulatory involvement that they have with the utilities. But they have some jurisdiction, and one of the first interaction that we had with them was to get the implementation plan done, which basically defines the way that you're going to operate, the way that you're going to deliver power, and a whole series of things essentially that are designed to make sure that the delivery of power will be reliable, and that when someone wants to turn on the lights, they're going to come on. At about that time, for us, it was just, I think, after we filed the implementation plan, we started to hire our staff, and we started to get ready. Once we hired our CEO, Jan Pepper, we started to hire others, and we started to get ready for when we would bring over the first set of customers. To be able to do that, you have to set up a bank account. For us, since we didn't have an operating history, we set up a bank account with Wilmington Trust and a lockbox, which ensured PG&E that the funds that would come in would be there to pay for, and the other power providers would be there to pay for the power. We obtained a $6 million commercial loan. We hired a firm to manage our data and roll those customers over from PG&E to Peninsula Clean Energy. We have approximately 290,000 customers, and it's about a $250 million a year amount of electricity that people purchase. So it's a very substantial organization. And once you launch, it moves extremely quickly. You're obligated to provide 4 opt-out notices to customers. And what Kirk talked about in terms of the NEM customers was something that we paid a lot of attention to. It is confusing, and you need to focus on it to make sure that the NEM customers understand what your policies will be. And we set some different policies than PG&E did, which I won't go into in detail here. But we've we've had a very good relationship with our NEM customers, partly because we pay them for excess power at a retail rate, so there's economic benefit to them. We consider it very much in our interest to encourage rooftop solar and power generation within the grid. So one of the goals that you saw on the first slide was that we would be developing 20 megawatts of local power in San Mateo County by 2025. We haven't started to launch that yet, but that's a goal and we will achieve that. Why don't you go to the next slide, Woody? Okay, so I think that a critical issue in deciding to do a CCA has to do with the economics. And like I said before, the investor-owned utilities have a substantial amount of money that they're sending out to their shareholders who are their investors, and they're generating a return, which is proper. But for us, our shareholders are the customers themselves. So we're able to invest in programs and reduced rates. And we're able to do that because we're not sending funds to an investor shareholder base, and our cost structure is substantially less than the utility. So the way that we rolled out is we initially launched to all of the municipalities in the county and about 20% of the customers. We did that in October 2016, and we rolled out to the remaining PG&E customers that came over in April 2017. And we did that with a 5% discount to every PG&E rate. And we were extremely successful in minimizing the opt-out rate. When we had modeled Peninsula Clean Energy, we modeled it expecting a 15% opt-out rate, which was about the experience that Marin County had. And we ended up with a 2% and 2.4% opt-out rate. So the economics for us were extremely attractive compared to what the modeling was that we initially modeled. That enabled us to pay off our startup loans within the first year of full operation. Really, after 9 months of full operation, we paid off our startup loans. Can you go to the next slide, Woody? Since April of 2017, which was our first full, 100% customer operation, the economics have been that we've been able to put aside approximately $5 million a month, which represents that difference that I talked about before in the structure between us and PG&E. And that enables us to look at all kinds of different local programs. We've built a very substantial reserve base, and we've just now begun to launch our programs. And I think that this board was very serious about building a sustainable organization that was economically responsible and that people could count on and know that it wasn't going to go away. We have a very large reserve policy, and we've met that reserve, and we've begun to launch local programs. So the first local programs that we're doing is we've launched an EV support program where we're working with dealerships to reduce the price of EVs in the county, and we're working with multi-unit housing to provide charging for those EVs. And I won't go into the detail of the program, but it looks like a very interesting program. We modeled part of it off of what Sonoma had done. They had done a very successful EV program. And I think the board feels really positive about it. We went out with a RFP for pilots, $75,000 pilots, just to see what people in the county might be interested, and we got a very large number of proposals. We'll be launching, I think, 7 of those pilots in the next few months, and over the next year, we're building up our program staff, and we'll be using a substantial amount of the retained dollars to support those programs. We haven't yet hired the staff to begin the electricity generation in the county, but that's one of our goals, and that's definitely something we will do. I think that might be the last slide.
Ah, right, it is. All right. Thank you very much, Rick. Great job. And so, folks, I got a message a short while ago from our third presenter, Darrel Pyle, City Manager for City of Hanford, and he stated that he got pulled away on an urgent matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk through a few of his slides and talk a little bit about what's going on in Hanford. And so some of this stuff is, aspects of it that I'm not super familiar with, so I will just go through some of these slides, including the sort of initiation of the conversation in the city of Hanford. And this one is just one that talks about the underpinning statute that enables community choice in the state of California in the Public Utilities Code. It's section 366.2. It's lots of fun to read. I've read over it many times. I found it interesting that they are working with some consultants specifically on developing local resources, which really, to me, is one of the most compelling, important aspects of community choice, is the degree to which being locally based entities, agencies, they are uniquely positioned to develop local resources. So, Rick, I'm happy to hear that you guys are certainly have that in your plans, and the city of Hanford as well is looking at developing local resources. There's a little bit here about the California Community Choice Association, the statewide trade association for community choice agencies. So that's background. Some of their best practices, and the last one there you see is local programs that serve, bring community benefits. So happy again to see that Hanford has that squarely in their program plans. So this gets to where, the city of Hanford's effort is an effort that is collaboration with the city of Lancaster and Lancaster Choice Energy. Lancaster Choice Energy was the third community choice agency to launch in the state of California. And once they were up and running, they decided to go ahead and form we call it a hybrid JPA sometimes, but form a core JPA with the city of San Jacinto. And they founded what's called the California Choice Energy Authority. That's what that CCEA is, their California Choice Energy Authority. And that is a JPA that invites other jurisdictions throughout the state to join. So I believe City of Rancho Mirage and City of Pico Rivera have also joined that. And Hanford is, I believe, the latest city to take up the offer from California Choice Energy Authority to have them provide them with a technical study, an evaluation, take a look at the load and what kind of rates might be offered and power mix. So they will, it's looking like they are moving forward on joining this joint hybrid JPA. So that's a screenshot from Lancaster Choice Energy's website, where they have information about the options, billing rates, and everything else that's offered through that community choice agency. So there are 3 main options there for 100% renewable or a default service or a solar-based program. And then, of course, folks can always opt out at any time and become a bundled customer with their investor-owned utility. That is something that is the same case for all community choice agencies under the statute. And then a little bit about just the basics of how it works. All right, so I think that brings us to our question and answer section. And so I'm going to bring back up, where is it? Sorry, this one. So, Nina, can you please let us know if there are any questions? I'm hearing a little bit of noise on someone's end here, Kirk and Rick. And Nina, if you have some shuffling going on, please shuffling. So go ahead. Do we have questions that come in?
Yeah, we have a few. This first one is for Rick specifically. Will Peninsula's rates still be 5% below PG&E after the recent passage of PCIA?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Nobody's talked about the PCIA. I assume that people are familiar with the PCIA, which is essentially an exit fee that the PUC is authorized to charge departing customers from a utility. So for Peninsula Clean Energy, our customers all came from PG&E, and as Kirk said, they remain PG&E customers for distribution purposes, but for generation purposes, they're now our customers. And their PG&E had entered into contracts to provide those customers with electricity when they were customers of PG&E. And those contracts are, for the most part, out of the market, either because just the purchase rates have come way down, and the amount that PG&E is obligated by contract to pay is high, or for reasons we could go into at some point, that they just weren't well negotiated. But there are costs, and the PUC is authorized to allocate those costs to the departing customers. That's called a PCIA fee, and we treat it as an exit fee. We pay that fee. We don't have the customers pay that fee. We cover that fee. So what the customer pays is 5% below the PG&E rate, less that exit fee, which we are bearing. And the PUC, at the instigation of the utilities, has looked at and is authorizing increases to that exit fee. We believe that we're going to be able to manage that. We're going to obviously have to look at it and monitor it, but right now we believe we're going to be able to manage that and continue. We're not going to make the amount of money that we're making right now in excess of our expenses, but we will continue to be profitable and use that for programs, and that will enable us to maintain the 5%. So the answer to the question is yes, we expect to do it, but we're not going to take the decision from the PUC on this exit fee line down. There's a very significant effort being developed statewide because in this process year, we're going to have 3.5 million customers taking electricity from CCAs, and we're going to try to reverse that decision through the legislature over the next year. It's going to be a big fight. But the answer to the question is we believe we're going to maintain the 5% discount.
And Kirk, did you want to say anything about Pioneer's response or expectations based on the October 11th CPUC decision?
Well, we don't really know what the full burden of that decision is going to be probably until about, we won't know until middle of November. We're anticipating we'll have a better idea what it means to us from a cost standpoint. But the real absurdity of this, I think, for folks to understand is essentially what is being said is that since PG&E locked in a number of long-term obligations, be they power purchase contracts or what have you, we have to pay as we exit. Now, understand what that means. It means that we are paying for the fact, our customers are paying for the fact that PG&E locked in long-term contracts which tie up capacity. Now we also have to go buy capacity. So we as a CCA are buying long-term capacity for which we're having to pay more because PG&E's long-term contracts have tied up capacity in the marketplace. So through the decision, we're having to pay for that capacity because we left PG&E and they are quote unquote stranded with it. And yet the suppliers can't double sell that long-term capacity. So it's reflected in higher costs that we have to pay. Ultimately, our customers have to pay by buying long-term capacity that isn't available because PG&E is saying, oh, we've already got it tied up. Now you have to pay us for it. So that's really the absurdity of this decision.
Right. Good. Thank you. Yeah, I'll just add that, there are some immediate, more near-term possible remedies, legal, regulatory, possibly legislative, which isn't necessarily near-term. But there's also a phase 2 part of this whole PCIA proceeding, and there may be some opportunities to mitigate some of the, some of the costs associated with the new methodology. So it's not entirely over, and I think, like Kirk said, it won't be entirely clear what the consequences are until sort of the turn of the year when the new 2019 PCIA is actually, out on the street. So we will see on that. Nina, further questions?
Yeah, so one here, I think, Woody, you can answer also. Are there any efforts for Central Valley communities for the creation of a new CCA, or is there a stronger local preference to join an existing program like Pioneer or PCE?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So maybe I'll start just by saying that we, Center for Climate Protection through our Clean Power Exchange program has been working, communicating with local governments in the Central Valley since mid-2016. And there is, that question about the governance structure is really up to each city, each county. Do they want to go single jurisdiction? Do they want to join in an existing operational agency? Do they want to form a JPA with their neighbors? Those are decisions that are really up to them, and just some of the options that they can consider. Haven't really gotten so much to that question yet. The earliest sort of stage is to have a formal evaluation, a study session, informational session of some sort. And so we're really looking to have that happen sometime soon in one of the jurisdictions. Rick or Kirk, did you want to speak to that at all?
I don't feel the need to, no.
Okay.
I think this is Rick. I think it's 100% up to the local community, and most, but not all, CCAs have been formed around a county initiation. There are several cities that have, like Lancaster, and in San Diego County, I believe there are 3 city-based efforts, one with 1 city, one with 2, and one with 4. It's a local decision. After PCE was in operation for a year, we had a serious conversation with San Jose, who was looking at what they wanted to do, and ultimately they decided they didn't want to join an existing CCA because they wanted to completely control their own programs, and I think that absolutely made sense for them. Our PCE's interest with the Central Valley is not to expand PCE. I mean, we frankly have never had that conversation about that. We've decided we are going to do whatever we can to help CCAs form in the Central Valley because of the resources that we're putting to bear in the Central Valley, and because we think it makes sense for those communities. This is not a coastal phenomenon. This is about whether we're going to keep these programs in our local communities or not. And if they did, you know, there are different ways that the CCA can structure itself, and I think that's 100% up to the local community.
Right, well said. And, you know, again, a part of the reason why the Center for Climate Protection is working in this Central Valley is a recognition of the economic and environmental challenges that the valley, you know, faces. You know, we chose to work there because we believe community choice energy can bring benefits to the community there that really nothing else can. You know, reversing that revenue stream out of the local jurisdictions into local control so that local programs tailored to meet the needs of the local community to help with air quality, jobs, you know, all kinds of aspects that could help folks in the Central Valley. Nina, other questions?
Yes, so there's a few more. This is for anyone to answer. Pertaining to IOU stranded assets, I have heard people use this as a reason to be skeptical of CCA development, but my question is this actually a problem being caused by CCAs, or is the stranded asset problem a reality of California IUs, regardless of these community choice energy models?
Well, this is Woody. I mean, I'll start that one off as well. I mean, I think the dynamic that we see, not just, you know, in California and not just in the context of community choice, is that with the rise of distributed energy, solar, wind, primarily, but other resources as well, that the conventional central station model is transitioning out, and large central station plants like Diablo Nuclear Power Plant and you know, large coal plants. I mean, the economics of those kinds of energy generation systems that are linked to ever rising fuel costs are, you know, being replaced by a new clean energy economy, a new energy paradigm that is more distributed, brings in you know, what we call energy democracy, more involvement, more ability for individuals and businesses to actually generate their own power, store their own power. We're seeing storage come up now. And so that's obviating the need for these, you know, legacy type conventional systems. And they are, yes, becoming stranded. Is that the fault of community choice? I would argue that it would be happening regardless of the emergence of community choice. Rick or Kirk, did you want to speak to that one? Hello?
Sure, I'll say something. Well, first, the fact that the costs exist have absolutely nothing to do with CCAs or the creation of CCAs. These are costs that the utilities entered into either as contractual costs where they negotiated with a third-party power provider, or as costs associated because the PUC allowed the utility to develop a gas plant or some other kind of generation system, which could be renewable or it could be natural gas. You know, so my opinion is that there's a big difference between those contractual costs and the utility utility-owned generation costs. And right now, that PCIA exit fee covers both those costs. the utility gets an investor return on the utility-owned generation fees, and that's something that we will be fighting. The fact that the costs are defined as now stranded costs has something to do with the CCAs because customers have left. And the utility would have been delivering the electricity generated from either those contracts or those assets. And the costs of that electricity are included in all of our rates, which the PUC sets. I believe that the utilities, their structure didn't lend them to negotiate hard on what those rates would be. And so the rates are very high and not economic.
That's correct.
There's also something to the fact that rates have gone down, but the existence of those costs have nothing to do with CCAs.
Thank you very much, Rick. And you know, I just looked at my little clock here. We are at time, so I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, Kirk and Rick, for the fantastic presentations. Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. Reminder about the community meeting in Fresno on November 13th at the Nielsen Conference Center. That's up on your screen there. For any follow-up, contact me. That's my contact information there. I can put you in touch with our Central Valley team as needed. And with that, I want to thank everyone and our presenters for today's webinar. Great job, and looking forward to having you join us for future webinars. Enjoy the day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.